Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started, but nice to see everyone join our Puro.earth CDR Showcase, first of its kind, recurring season or session that you'll see quarter over quarter or more frequently as we grow and develop this series into something more and more exciting. But to go ahead and get us started, I just want to say my name and where I am. I'm Trenton Spindler. I'm the Chief Growth Officer out of Atlanta, Georgia at Puro.earth. And on behalf of the entire team and panelists we have here, I really want to thank you for joining. As I mentioned earlier, the series kicks off a new session designed to bring you what's closer to carbon removal. That's credible supply, growing buyer traction, and having market-ready offtake opportunities. And what we're bringing to you today is that we're showing you that it's being done live, directly from the source of suppliers, and with a focus on action, what's scaling next, and how buyers and partners like you in the audience can engage immediately. It is mid-2025. The market is shifting, and I would say after years of pilot projects and proof points, we're now seeing the first real industrial decarbonization flywheels emerge. There's steel, cement, fuels, power, so many more that aren't just emission problems anymore. They're becoming net negative opportunities with carbon removals integrated directly into infrastructure, materials, supply chains, and more. To put it to a number, actually, I thought this was interesting. In Q2 of this year alone, around 14.5 million tons of carbon removal purchases were publicly announced. That's more than double everything the market has seen to date, quarter over quarter, year over year. That kind of growth isn't just a spike, though. We think it's a signal. Buyers are moving away from exploration and moving towards execution, and they're doing it in partnership with platforms, suppliers, and intermediaries that can deliver at the scale and growth and integrity they expect. I'll say at Puro.earth, we sit at the intersection of supply, demand, and data. We know what's being certified. We get to see what's getting traction, and we built this showcase so you don't have to wait for a report or an article to find out what's real. You can hear it directly from us, from the suppliers building it, and from the team that's translating these signals into clear market direction. So without further ado, here's what to expect over the next 45 minutes. You're going to have 2 supplier spotlights. You're going to have OCO Technology and Gevo, both with cork-ready inventory and long-term and near-term offtake potential available. You're going to see a data-driven look at market momentum with Julian Jacob from our offtakes and investor team at Puro. You're going to have a live Q&A, so please drop your questions in the chat at any time, at any moment. We'll try to do our best to answer them on the fly, but we'll also have a bit of a Q&A spot at the end of the session, 10 to 15 minutes, where we'll answer any questions you have, discuss any comments you might want to bring out, and connect you with the suppliers that you need to connect with. And then we'll close things out with a few takeaways and how to follow up on what you've seen. So I'll flag, this isn't a sales pitch. It's really meant to be a clear window into what's investable, what's scalable, and what's verifiable today. So whether you're a buyer, a sales partner, an investor, we welcome you. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're actually going to start across the pond here too, with a leader in carbonated materials. So please, I'd like to have everyone welcome Dr. Peter Gunning, the Director of Supply and Sustainability at OCO, one of the most established players in carbon mineralization. I would just ask, Peter, would you introduce yourself a little bit about OCO, and then please take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trent. And yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name is Peter Gunning. I'm Director of Sustainability and Technology at OCO Technology. We are a mineralization business. We have been operating for around 15 years, so we're certainly one of the pioneers in the sector. And I'm very delighted to tell you a bit about our work and how we're expanding internationally. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully it's going to work. This is a share request. Okay, there we go. I think we're in business now. Okay. Okay, so the presentation is going to be divided into 3 parts. Firstly, I just want to tell you a bit about OCO Technology and what we do. Then we'll take a bit of a dive into the methodology that we've developed with Puro. And then lastly, just have a look at our inventory, what our growth projections are, and some of our many customers. Just to kick off though, in case you're wondering what is OCO technology, it's basically carbon dioxide. It's an oxygen, a carbon and an oxygen, and the dots between them represent the bonds, so it's carbon technology. As a business, we are three things. We are a waste treatment business, we're a carbon capture business, and we are a manufacturer of sustainable construction products. Our UK model is we take in waste from a variety of different industrial sectors, we permanently mineralise carbon, and we turn that material into useful construction products. Elsewhere in the world, we've deployed the technology differently. We've used it successfully as a means of stabilising and reducing the toxicity of waste, purely as a pre-treatment to landfill mechanism, but still capturing carbon. At the core of our process is something we call accelerated carbonation technology, and we're basically turbocharging what nature would be doing. So carbonation is a naturally occurring phenomenon of the rock cycle, which takes centuries or millennia to take place, and we're doing that in a matter of just a few minutes. We're doing that using reactive waste materials, and these reactive waste materials could come from a variety of different sources. It could be ash residues from municipal energy from waste plants. It could be byproducts from cement production or from production of metallurgical products like steel. We can also treat residues from paper and various other industries, such as coal power generation and also biomass energy generation. These materials have abundant amounts of reactive calcium salts in the form of oxides and hydroxides, and these will react under controlled conditions with water and CO2 to produce calcium carbonate. The CO2 we use in our process is purely biogenic. In the UK, we are using high purity liquid CO2, which is derived either from anaerobic digestion, so that's biomethane production, from which carbon dioxide is a byproduct, or from carbon capture from distillation. We have demonstrated that technology can be applied using other sources of CO2. So we are trialling a DAC facility at one of our facilities in the UK, and that will be supplying a proportion of the CO2 which will have been stripped from the atmosphere. But together with our partners in Japan, we've also developed a system whereby we can strip CO2 directly from flue gases with minimal gas processing. Once we put all those ingredients together, what we end up with is what we call manufactured limestone. It is, after all, calcium carbonate. And that manufactured limestone can be used pretty much like any other aggregate you could think of. So it can go into construction products such as concrete, asphalt, and masonry. You can see in the background here, this is a photograph of one of our UK facilities. So the business has been in operation now for 15 years. But prior to that, there was around 20 years of university-based research and development supporting that. We currently have 3 facilities in the UK, which have a combined processing capacity of around 250,000 tonnes of waste per year. Over the course of our lifetime, we've recycled well over 2 million tonnes of waste and produced well over 4 million tonnes of manufactured limestone. It's a very exciting time for us because we are now growing internationally and we have a number of projects which I'll tell you a bit more about later. 2024 was also a very important year because we won the King's Award for Sustainable Development. So moving on, just to have a little look at the methodology, and this was a bit of a challenge. How do you take a 50-page document and condense it into a single PowerPoint slide? Well, this is my attempt. So just to break down the different elements of how our methodology works, it all starts off with developing an LCA, or life cycle assessment. Ours is in the form of an EPD, or environmental product declaration, which we have built using the one-click LCA software. That EPD is what you would call a cradle to gate conventionally, but is now known as an A1 to A3. So that takes into account the emissions associated with the raw materials we use, the transport of raw materials to our manufacturing site, and any energy used in the form of electricity or diesel. And those emission factors are then balanced by the CO2 that we permanently mineralise in our process. So overall, 1 tonne of our manufactured limestone will capture around about 60 kilograms net of CO2. So in the UK, we're generating about 20 to 25,000 credits per year. If we look at the baseline position, the materials that we are working with would simply be going to landfill. And standard landfill practice is such that these materials would be compacted and a capping layer or cover placed over them immediately, effectively sealing them off from the atmosphere permanently. So there's virtually zero removal associated. So that capture potential is lost. If we look at additionality, OCO Technologies process, there is a significant amount of CapEx involved in establishing one of our facilities, as well as ongoing OpEx. But also any profits that we make are reinvested in new facilities, so facilitating further carbon capture. Permanence, we're making rock, so it's perfectly stable carbonate minerals, and the chances of it being reversed are very, very small. Only by exposure to extreme heat or strong acid are the carbonates going to break down and be released. So this means effectively our carbon credits are of the highest caliber. We actively monitor the amount of carbon that we capture in the product, and that's not through stoichiometry or flow meters. We actually sample and test the product. And we use a technique called acid digestion eudiometry, whereby we take samples of material, we grind it up and we dissolve it in acid and we measure the amount of CO2 that's liberated. And that's the way we can get a truly accurate measure of the CO2 we capture. If we look at management systems, of course, we've got the usual ISO certs around 9001, 14001, 18001, and a whole plethora of other aspects around permits and regulations. But we manage a lot of that through the Alcove system, and this is proven to be a very useful tool regarding both our inventory management and also our DMRV. Finally, the verification aspect, and that has been handled by 350 Solutions, who've been appointed by Puro.earth. Moving on lastly to the inventory. So this is what our growth projections look like. And as I said, this is an incredibly exciting time for us. So if we just take a look at the current year, we currently only have the UK plants operational, which is generating, as I mentioned, around 20,000 tons of 20,000 corks per year. Next year, we start to expand in the UK, and that will take us to around 23,000. The following year to 26, and then up to around 32,000 in 2027, 2028. Next year is also doubly exciting because our first European plant will become operational, and that is in Bilbao in Spain. That is a joint venture with Repsol. We formed a company called BEA, or Biscay Eco Aggregates. That will generate around 6,000 credits in total. The following year, we aim to have our first plant in the United States operational, which will add another 6,000 corks to the equation, taking us up to around 38,000 in total. The year after that, we anticipate further plants appearing in the United States, and our first plant in Japan will become operational, taking us to approximately 56,000. The year after that, growth really escalates in the United States, taking that to 45,000. And we will see new plants appearing in Japan and our first plant in Australia becoming operational, which is already in the early stages of planning. And then 2029-30, that will take us overall to around 146,000 tonnes as we have a second Australian site become operational, a third site in Japan, and additional sites appearing both in the EU and in the United States. These are some of our customers, so I'm not going to go through them all, but some big names there, people like Microsoft, Swiss Re, Credit Suisse, and many more besides. And then lastly, we're also working with a number of partners to help us manage our portfolio, so people like ClimeFi, Curate, Caesar, and Patch. That's the end, and of course, I'll be delighted to answer any questions you have in the session later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Very, very exciting. I love cool presentations that have great exposure to doing things for real and actually, expanding at scale. I don't know. I just think that's one of the best parts of this job is to get to see how you guys have such a circular model and how you can grow so quick, so fast. But I know we have some other really exciting supplier spotlights coming up. So I want to make sure we transition over. With that said, we're actually now heading stateside for those Americans on the call. Sorry, one here, where carbon removal is now integrated directly into low carbon fuel production. I would just ask that we welcome Alex Clayton, Chief Business Development Officer from Gevo, to tell us a bit more about how they're setting a new bar for BECCS. And as OCO did, would love to know about available inventory, where you're going, and what you're doing. But Alex, please take it away after you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Trenton. So I'm Alex Clayton, Chief Business Development Officer. You're going to get a business guy's view. Apologies for those after following Dr. Gunning there. The combination of technology and sustainability, that's a double threat. So this is a business guy's view of our operations and why we've made the investments we've made on our journey. So at Gevo, at our core, we are a low carbon intensity biofuels company. We spent about the last 20 plus years developing renewable hydrocarbon technologies. So how do we take alcohols made from fermentation and convert them to direct drop-in hydrocarbon replacements? And the market of focus is sustainable aviation fuel. But opportunities exist in gasoline and diesel, marine shipping, and others as well. So a true kind of biorefinery concept with the ability to focus on, hard-to-abate sectors like aviation is where we'll start. On that journey, Gevo acquired an asset in Richardton, North Dakota, formerly referred to as, and will always in some hearts be referred to as Red Trail Energy. This is a fantastic story of how this got started and how this got enabled. And Gevo was really just stepped in here towards the end as a lot of the hard work had already been done, and now really helping to sort of develop the market for the CDRs and really sort of define this transformation story of going from existing biofuel production today with ethanol in the gasoline space and continuing to invest in the site to go to sustainable aviation drop-in fuels. So just a quick highlight of what we have. I'll start here in the center and kind of work around. The Puro certification is based on our co-located on-site Class 6 well that is operating, that brings us 1,000 plus year permanence under the geological storage methodology there with Puro. Our story is really about an offset to inset approach where the CCS is a key highlight of how we will decarbonize jet fuel in the future. It brings us about a third of the way to a net zero sustainable aviation fuel. Another third can be dealt with in dealing with process energy, and another third is around the feedstock. This site is operational. We've generated over the life of the project approaching 400,000 credits, and have the ability to deliver at scale. So we're in our third continuous year of operations, permitted for about 180,000 tons per year. We're putting about 165,000 tons into the well each year. But that formation has the ability to expand up to about 1 million tons per year. We'll talk a little bit about the co-benefits in the business system, but that shoots me right back to the top left, which is around tracing feedstocks. So on our journey with SAF, we've invested a lot in sort of upstream agriculture MRV platform. For us, that's called Verity, which is about tracking and tracing feedstocks and other environmental and carbon and other environmental attributes associated with bringing agricultural products into environmentally tracked and traced markets and products. This is a quick sort of image, highlighting sort of where we are and how we operate. So what's important to note here is proximity of our feedstock, future investments that will take place in green or decarbonized energy sources to operate that plant, the plant being co-located with the Class 6 well, and bringing both fuel and food and feed products to the market. The well itself and the formation are ideally suited for what we're doing here. There's some additional monitoring work going on site, some additional protections and added layers of redundancy in how this well was constructed to give a lot of confidence in what we're doing there on that site. Coming back to kind of surface view, here's a quick flyover of how things work. Naturally via biology, plants will draw down atmospheric CO2. Gevo's way of producing, and the business system we use at our ethanol plant, is producing food and fuel. Every time we're generating fuel, we're generating CO2, we're generating food and feed out of that same product, and doing that responsibly, taking on that mission of food and feed and fueling and decarbonization. It's a complicated challenge and a complicated mission that we don't take lightly, and look to work with great organizations like Puro and how to do this in the best way possible. Yeah, and here giving an example of the deepness of that well, over 6,500 feet deep, where the biogenic CO2 is captured and sequestered. You'll see the existing product slate is around ethanol. You have the jet fuel as a coming soon, so stay tuned type of attraction. Corn oil is also produced that goes into the existing renewable diesel and SAF space, while the protein and fiber are returned to various food and feed applications. Just to give an idea of the journey that the team and the site have been on, the ethanol plant actually began operations in 2007, spearheaded by a farmer-led investment group locally there to bring new markets, or what they saw as a need for new markets in that region. Starting in 2017, really the stakeholder engagement, permitting process, and really the knowledge base and the journey began for getting that CCS well instituted there. In 2021, the first Class 6 well permit in North Dakota was issued to the site. And by 2022, the operation was moving forward. 2024 brought a big milestone where we had the first issuance under the Puro.earth geologically stored carbon protocol for the vintage 23 and some 24 corks. And then just earlier this year, late January, my company Gevo completed the acquisition of the site, maintaining the existing operations and bringing some additional investments that help improve the farmer experience there at the plant and sort of position us for this journey we're going on of in the future converting over to SAF. I mentioned before quickly, we work with the Wright Institute and EERC. There's some work ongoing to help generate the next generation of CCS monitoring technologies and tools to be used elsewhere. I think this part of the process is really important. Starting with in the field with the agriculture product, that's really where our Verity tracking and tracing digital ag solutions come into place, bringing visibility into how the farmers farm, the location of their field, drawing traceability back to that location, and tracking other environmental attributes. The fermentation happens on site at the plant, where the capture and storage also takes place via that Class 6 well. Our LCA has been developed by eco-engineers, and then 350 Solutions, another showing here for them on the audit space, and then the certificate and issuance handled by Puro, among many other things that they do over there. Finally, I wanted to kind of start to wrap up with just a little bit of a did you know, and remind everybody of what we think our job to do here is, and we don't shy away from it. The job to be done is reducing complexity in agriculture supply chains with data. We think data is really, really important to highlighting what's going on as we feed and fuel our economies. Some of the things that are interesting in the U.S. context: cropland has steadily declined over the past 30 years. What that means is we honestly haven't needed as much. Corn yields continue to increase. Soy would be in the same vein, allowing more grain to be produced on the same footprint of land. At the same time, we've seen a large increase in biofuels, mainly ethanol, and also now renewable diesel, previously biodiesel. Feed, food, and export volumes, specifically for corn, have remained stable, even with the addition of biofuels. This indicates, a need for new markets to open up, for the farmers to keep doing what we all want them to do, growing nutritious and low-cost food and feedstuffs for our economies. And this is mainly driven by seed technology, genetics, agronomic gains, investments in infrastructure and machinery made by farming and farming communities. Empirical data shows the U.S. is low risk for indirect land use change. Specifically to the U.S., this has been the case. Data has showed historically that ILUC has not occurred. We've actually had a reduction in land use at the same time as we've had an expansion in corn production and resulting ethanol. Another one that's interesting to keep in mind is that technology does exist to track upstream agriculture. It can seem a bit complicated, a bit messy, a lot of farmers supplying very big agricultural processing facilities, but it is possible to get back to that field level footprint, and tokenize that data and move it forward in a supply chain, where you can really start to build credible environmental claims. A last one to note here, and this is contributed by me. I've spent the last 8 years working in intermediate and cover crops in South America, and beyond all else, farmers respond to economic incentives. Why do farmers take on reduce their tillage? It's economics, and it's improving economics to their fields. Why do they do anything? This is their livelihood. This is how they make their dollars, and they respond to economic incentives. So if we, as a society or as a group of organizations, want to see something happen in agriculture, there's a very efficient way to start to get that done. The last note, did you know, that I'll leave you with is, for every Puro certified cork that we issue, there's an additional 1 ton of food and feed by way of protein and fiber returned to the feed system, and there's 1 ton of biofuel being brought into the market that's displacing fossil fuels. So we should all feel good about what we're doing there. We'll leave off with sort of where we're at. So operating since 2022, we're actively sequestering carbon. We're generating verified carbon credits. Our facility has a world-class safety rating, and we're extremely proud of that. There's ongoing stakeholder engagement in those community and management of permits, and we are on schedule for this project to sequester over 1 million tons of CO2 before the end of 2030, and that is a goal we intend to hit. We've issued approaching 400,000 credits to date, about 180,000 credits retired, a lot of those to the compliance-led biofuels market, but starting to see more sales as standalone CDRs. And we have about 90,000 credits ready to deliver and coming soon. On the right-hand side, a thing we love about Puro is the availability of all the project documents. You can start some light diligence on your own if and when you're interested. And in the top right, it's a QR code. Send us a link if you're interested in coming and taking a look at the site. We'll be hosting some tours. We can get you fully immersed in what sustainable farming looks like today, how we produce biofuels, and where that CO2 goes. So with that, I'll maybe throw it back over to you, Trent, and thank the Puro team for the stage there for a few minutes.
Awesome. Happy to have you. And thank you so much, Alex, Jivo. We appreciate you guys sharing some cool stuff. Same thing, Dr. Gunning, CEO. What cool suppliers to have on screen and just get to share with the world in every time zone. But be sensitive to time, and I see a handful of questions are still coming in. Do note that some are being answered. Reminder, you can take a look in the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window or in your browser and see what questions have been asked, what have been answered, and then what might be missing that you want to suggest. But without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening maybe a little bit wider than just what's on the ground. What's driving some behavior? Maybe what are some real opportunities? And just unpack a little bit of the market. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Julian, let you do a brief intro, and then let you walk through some market information that I think we're all so curious to hear about. But please and thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that. Should I share my own slide, or is because it's part of the text that Will shared?
Yes, go ahead and share your slides.
Okay, Thank you. Oh, okay. All right, just 1 second. Sorry for that. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my PowerPoint now.
Looks great. Just hit allow on Zoom. All good.
Okay, all right. So I'm here to tell you a bit more about the trends that we're seeing in the market this past few months in CDR. So starting with this, Trenton, you mentioned that earlier in the call, but there has been an unprecedented growth in the CDR sales happening in Q2 25, and we're past 2/3 of it now. What happened was the announcement of 14.5 million tons of CO2 being purchased on a forward basis. And if you look at what the market was on the right-hand side there at the end of Q1, market was close to 15 million. So we've effectively doubled the forward market there. Now, looking a bit closer to it, the incremental or the increase of 14.5 was made at 93% from 4 deals. And all 4 deals were imputable to one buyer, which was Microsoft. The methodologies that dominated that increase were BEX, for the most part, was 90% of the increase, and then biochar, which were roughly 10% of the increase. In parallel to that, we, as Puro, track the amount of requests that go to our suppliers from intermediaries. As you know, most of the CDR market, I would say today, or a big part of the CDR market today is intermediated. We've tracked that over 700,000 tons or 700,000 credits were asked to our suppliers in the last 2 months. Now, I want to give a bit of a story different than the usual, it's very concentrated and there's only one buyer. And for that, I want to use a case of a CDR pathway, which has had a few years in the making, which has had now over 100 suppliers selling credits, and over importantly, which has reached hundreds of buyers. So biochar, had a bit of a head start compared to other CDR pathways. We started, I think, certifying biochar with Puro 5 years or 6 years ago. And if you look at the curves on the right-hand side, you can see that the top line here shows that the time between issuance of a Puro biochar credit and retirement of a Puro biochar credit on average has fell down from 200 days in 21 progressively to 66 days in 25. And then if we look at the average days between issuance and the first transfer of a biochar Puro cork, we'll also see that this has moved from 100 days to now 22 days. So what's really interesting here to see is, as a methodology progresses, as buyers become more aware of it, as more and more suppliers are engaged into it, the market becomes very dynamic. And the result of that is low inventory, demand over existing supply. Other few elements here also to testify for the strengths of this particular pathway that, again, had a bit of a head start is 80% of retirement to issuance in Puro biochar cork over the last 18 months, roughly. A diversified pool of buyers retiring biochar credits. So we've counted 176 last year and 67 year to date. And also the dominance of intermediation, whereby 85% of the core buyers have procured biochar credits through sales intermediaries. Now, if we look at BEX and carbonated materials, so the two methodologies that respectively GIVO and OCO work under, we do see that, on the right-hand side, you have quite you have less suppliers there that have actually made sales. 81 in biochar, and then 15 in BECCS, and 7 in carbonated materials. And more importantly, if you look at the number of issued credits, all of the issued credits so far in BECCS have been JIVO, and basically 2/3 of the credits that have been issued in carbonated materials have been OCO. So there are forward sales under both methodologies, but those projects are coming up. And that compares, with a few more suppliers that have been opportunities to issue under biochar. So BECCS and carbonated materials, they have lots of advantages for themselves. Typically, buyers really like the fact that both methodology are associated with high permanence of carbon storage, as well as easy monitoring and verification. Compared to biochar, I think one of those drivers beyond the success story of that other methodology is that people have been able to advance the learning curve, understand the methodologies, talk to numerous suppliers, and more importantly, in my view, see tangible assets. What you have here with JIVO and with OCO is first movers under their respective methodology that are building new spot markets that buyers and intermediaries can familiarize themselves with. And again, they have tangible assets. So I really recommend that you engage with them, seek pictures or visits, depending on where you're located, to really see what's happening there and for the years to come.
Thank you, Julian. That was great. I appreciate it. Thank you for leaning in, and thank you for connecting, how markets mature, and I think where we're all seeing things grow and really develop, which is what we want in this market, right? There's lots of market making. We're going to go up and down and around, but the core item here is that we see a nice regression line when we look backwards that is going up, and that is what we see across different pathways, and we're starting to see it replicated across multiple pathways that have started at different times. And I just think that's a phenomenal and very exciting indicator for market health and market maturity and where we're going. So with that all said, I do want to transition and give us a bit time to have a Q&A. And I know we already have a handful of questions that have been answered. So if everyone's fine with this, I will likely not read the answer questions. Thank you very much, everyone that's been able to do that. I encourage everyone on this call that has an interest in those answered questions to take a look. There was one general one that I'll mention. Someone asked if they get a recording of this presentation after the fact. Just want to mention, yes, it'll be shared via email after the webinar. So don't feel like you have to take notes or screenshots on every single thing you have. With that said, I'm going to go through our question and answer group, and I'll just go top to bottom, or at least bottom to top, I guess. But we'll start with this one because I saw it first a while back. Question here is maybe a goal to all. Well, let me go here on this one. Here we go. They're all coming in now. Here we go, OCO. Here's one for you. You mentioned about the permanence of carbon sequestration in green construction products. Have you considered or studied the scenario of demolition of such concrete buildings over time? Any reversal risks in that case?
I wouldn't be able to say that the risk is absolutely zero, but the CO2 has been mineralized as a stable carbonate. So the practice of recycling construction demolition waste is common across much of the world. So when buildings reach end of life, they're going to be demolished, they're going to be crushed up, they're going to be used in the next life cycle as a road or to make new concrete, and those carbonates will persist.
Thank you. That was great. I'm hitting that answered live, but if anyone has further questions, please feel free to ask because we didn't type it in there. And I see a handful of these questions. I'll let the group know. If you have an interest in partnering with OCO or JIVO or anyone in that matter, I would ask that you reach out to them after the fact. I would love to make it a group question, but I'll probably push that to after the call just so that you guys can connect asynchronously on it instead of front of the whole audience. But there's quite a few here. Let me go down the list. One that was sent to me privately that I think might be good. I mean, I don't think we've answered it. And sorry, OCO, it's another one to you. But what do you think is the mineralization or potential contribution of carbon mineralization in wastes? What do you think is the potential contribution of carbon mineralization in wastes?
Okay, I think this is one that's been it would say it's been ignored, but perhaps maybe not appreciated, because there's a huge amounts of these wastes arising around the globe. We're talking hundreds of millions of tons of material, which is just begging to be packed full of CO2. There've been various studies that have been carried out that indicate that if you were to utilize all of these materials that are readily available, it could be contributing gigatons of carbon removals every single year.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. I'll move it around the room. I'm just keeping it going. So, Julian, I'll go to you. You have a big one, which I don't think is an easy answer, but maybe there's a speculative opinion here. At some point, I think in your presentation a couple minutes ago, right at the end, they go, what does this all mean for biochar in the future? There's a lot of pathways or directions that could go on a decision tree. But what's your comment? I think it's very healthy, and there's a lot of upward potential, as we saw with Exomad's deal with Microsoft recently. But what about you? Any other thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying not to make this about biochar specifically. What I'm trying to say is, with the head start that biochar got as a market, it has developed, it's gone advanced the learning curve. Buyers go specifically asking for biochar now. And this is great. And I think we're at the start of seeing the same for other methodologies and CDR pathways. So yes, biochar is in a good place. I think it's scaling nicely. It has its limits also in terms of, scaling in a very decentralized way. So you kind of need to start a new project every time you want to add another tens of thousands, let's say, cork potential. But it has reached major audience, and it is in the public domain.
Thank you. That was helpful. I wish there was another one for you, Alex. You get the easy day, Alex. That means presentations were the best. No, I joke. OCO, I have another one for you. Most waste ash you mentioned is from really polluting activities. Are there any other waste sources that are not sustainable by default?
Oh, so that's an interesting question. I think it's looking at this just slightly differently. Why is material considered a waste? And often that's just tradition. It's a troublesome material. It's much easier to dispose of it. I think it's got to look at it slightly differently. What can you do with it? Because there's very few materials out there that are genuinely completely useless.
That's a helpful answer. Thank you. Type in these live for people. I got another one that I'll toss to myself to give everyone a breather, because I don't get to talk today. Darn. But someone asked how about the risk associated with buyers still being concentrated to large tech companies like Microsoft and Google, and how is that expected to be managed? I'll say this in a very short paragraph. There are new buyers coming. We have a large number of buyers of corks across the Puro ecosystem, beyond just the large tech players in the market, though they do have large purchases, large forward offtake agreements, and quite a bit of investment in the market. But it makes sense, right? They have a lot of capital. They need to invest early to get the economies of scale up and the cost curve down. So there is an incentive for them to do that. But there are a lot of second wave buyers looking to enter the market, testing items, purchasing a few credits here and there and retiring. I could go through again and again how many interesting names we have at Puro. Well over, I think, 150 different buyers of different organizations, different industries across the world that actually purchase corks. So I would say demand is growing, but you will see those large names in the media, and they will have some influence, but they're very pragmatic. They want to see the cost curves come down, and they're here to see the market mature. So what I would say is they are something to be cognizant of. They're very important to catalyzing the market and making it successful. But more buyers are coming, and more are exploring to purchase, especially this year into future years. So keep talking to buyers, keep communicating, because it's not a quick sales cycle. But once you've secured a relationship with a buyer, it makes the sales cycle much shorter year over year. So work hard this year and bring in the second wave and connect with them while they're doing their exploratory research, and when they're making their procurement decisions for not just next year, but for future years beyond next year. So there's a little bit of concentrated risk, but not as much as people think. Alex, please go right ahead. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add on and maybe try to draw everyone to the example that Julian gave us. So we have credits that are issued. We're actively out marketing those. We're having a lot of conversations. There are opportunities for larger volume offtakes, but I think it's really important in building this market to go through the process with a lot of buyers. Like Trenton said, they may be looking for smaller volumes. They need to build out that muscle, how to do these transactions, how to go through that process. how to make the business case internally, how to highlight that business case over a few thousand quarts as they move to, tens of thousands and much, much more. I appreciate the nods from Dr. Gunning. I think being some of the first ones out there, it's important to do all of the above. We're seeing other industries start to come in that didn't have any understanding they could access these types of CDR credits because they were seeing a lot of forward-based deals for large volumes to move things forward. So there's a lot of education, a lot of conversations, and a lot of things we can all do to sort of make everybody a bit more comfortable to come get a bit closer to us, and shorten those cycles, improve those use cases, and bring the economic decision makers that we need to this market.
Much more articulate answer than mine. I should have given that to you originally, Alex. Good job.
It was an emphasis.
I liked it. This is good. And there's only a couple more questions coming in. I know there are a handful others in the chat, a lot of them around partnerships and asking for advice and support, which we'll be happy to do async on that, but we won't be doing that on the call today. But one other question I see for you, Dr. Gunning, is has any of the limestone process so far been used commercially in any ready mixed or manufactured concrete?
Yes, it has. Yes, so we sell quite a large proportion of our aggregate for the ready mix industry. So it's used in all manner of applications. So if you're familiar with your concretes, certainly in the UK, the sort of classifications would be a Gen 0 up to a Gen 3. So this would be up to about sort of a 25 kilonewton concrete. So, used readily for building foundations and other sort of similar applications.
Awesome. Thank you. I see a couple other questions here, which I'll answer, and then I think we'll see if there's any others coming in. One might be to you, Julian, but I'll put a comment there. Would you say the lowered average transaction times are also being related to buyer speed and attention to due diligence? Well, I'll ask you. How do you feel about that, Julian? What's helping reduce the speed and time to revenue? One, I would say, is Puro and our efficiency and how we've improved and grown as an org, but maybe expand on your point of view there.
Yeah, there's probably a few reasons. I think indeed one of them is the trust in the brand that is a cork, so a Puro carbon dioxide removal certificate, which basically, especially for spot requests, is very valuable. Another reason for that is I think an increased amount of offtakes. Also, that result in pretty quick transaction after the issuance because the buyer has been identified.
Awesome, thank you. I agree, and I would say for those that don't know our services, I would argue that products and services like our preliminary assessment and other tools that we provide do allow for quicker revenue generation. It decreases the time for due diligence. It makes spot easier, as Julian mentioned. And it makes offtake agreements quicker to secure, although those are long-term agreements and should take a teeny bit of time to develop. So healthy rigor there, we would all argue. Excuse me, last question I see here, and then I'm going to close the Q&A, is does it make sense to deal with a management company like Carbon Future to sell large amounts of credits? I will say on this thread here that it is completely up to you and your discretion on how you want to go to market. I would say intermediaries or companies like Carbon Future and many others provide an enormous amount of value and can be contributed to the value chain of getting credits or corks sold quicker, faster, sooner, better, whatever euphemism you want to use. In the same vein, we have very, very successful suppliers that do it by themselves. So I would say it depends on your internal resourcing, your capabilities, your intellectual capital that you've hired, and the access you have to not only the existing purchasers in the market, but the future entrants that are looking or evaluating to go into CDR today or to broaden their ESG strategy or whatever they might be doing in the sustainability realm. So the answer is yes and or maybe, depending on your needs, what you want to do and how fast you want to move. But we wouldn't suggest not or doing it. It's really customized to your particular situation and who you want to work with. I'll ask this group here, any other opinions, Alex or Dr. Gunning, on this area on partners? I know there's tons of value and each of them offer different types of value. So.
Yeah, no, I would echo everything you said there because we do both. We sometimes work directly with the purchasers, and other times we work with brokers and other entities to do it on our behalf, and a mixture of the two works very well. We've got in the audience Louis Wright, who manages our carbon sales, and yeah, as I say, we find a blend works perfect for us.
Awesome. Well, I see
I
a
think
couple other questions. Oh, go ahead, please, Alex. Yes, right ahead.
Sorry, Trent. I was just going to say, I think one thing for us to notice, and we've seen this with other VCM products as well, right? When those intermediaries start building their own inventory, that's a signal of kind of a lot of buyers standing behind them, and an interesting turning point for this specific market. I think because of the price point, because of how the transactions are moving, we haven't seen as many of these players start building their own inventory. They're connecting the dots to buyers. And so, without commenting on what the right strategy is, I think an interesting thing for us all to be paying attention to is when do those companies start really stepping in and building their own inventory, because they have a whole lot of confidence in being able to efficiently place those with a large host of buyers. This is where that whole ecosystem play, I think, really starts to become important, as to how we're all thinking about how everyone helps make this a really well-functioning market.
Thank you. I actually saw a good question after this, but I think I'm going to land and end on this one because that was a very nice concerted answer from this whole group. I know there's probably a handful of questions that are going to still be sent afterwards. I would encourage our audience here to go ahead and submit them now, and then we'll do our best to circulate them wider to this group and see what we can do to help you out with some questions if they're very effective. But with that all said, I want to just initially thank everyone on this panel, everyone behind the scenes that got this ready to go. OCO, Jivo, Puro, Julian, Peter, Alex, all of you, thank you so much for joining and all the teamwork that you guys have contributed to making this happen. I would say if there's one thing to take away from this showcase, it's that the carbon removal market isn't just growing, it's maturing. OCO, Jivo, and many others that this group today heard from aren't pitching concepts. You're pitching reality. You have certified carbon removals that have already been delivered, that are going to be delivered in the future as well. And you're building not only the infrastructure today and yesterday, but tomorrow. So you've done it, you're doing it today, you're going to continue to do it and improve upon it. What a better place to get active and involved in from a buy side than parties and suppliers that are scaling quickly and efficiently and showing they can do it year over year over year. And then we went over to Julian, I would say, and we saw on the demand side that there are clear signals, real offtakes, buyer urgency. If you remember that number I mentioned in Q2 of 14 million, there are large indicators that demand is here to stay, whether it's from aviation to construction or other hard-to-abate industries. It's not just about early adoption anymore. It is about competitive positioning for buyers and how they're thinking about not only their products and services, but the value prop they provide as a company on their expenses, their products, their services, and just who they are as a corporate entity. So whether you're a corporate buyer, I would say, a sales channel, or an intermediary, or those management companies that some of you have mentioned as a term, here's what I'd say you can do right now. From what I've heard from Alex and Dr. Gunning and Julian and many others over the past few weeks is reach out to the suppliers you heard from today and in the past. Quotes are available, but they're going very, very, very quick. So we encourage everyone to reach out now before supply becomes a bit constrained. Follow up with our team at Puro. Julian, the head of our offtake and investor solutions team, is exploring numerous matchmaking opportunities across buyers, suppliers, financiers, and more, helping to connect them and make the time to revenue quicker and faster and more efficient for both suppliers and buyers, as well as being able to know what inventory we have and what inventory is potentially coming. And then finally, I would say stay engaged. Please keep joining our seminars and our webinars like this. This is just our first in our quarterly showcase series, but there's more coming. And the next set of suppliers may be exactly what you need, or you may see some of the older suppliers we had come back on and share their updates on new facilities, new inventory, and new science. It'll be exciting regardless of what we do. As I mentioned again, we'll be sending the recording, speaker contacts, and follow-up materials your way shortly. And we'd love your feedback so you can help us make the next session more valuable, more impactful, and more of what you want and what the CDR market needs to grow. So without further ado, I'll just say thank you again. Let's keep scaling this market together. And until then, stay carbon negative. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for joining, and chat with everyone very, very soon, I'm sure. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.